Hello and welcome. Welcome to Accelerate Innovation with your frontline workforce. I hope you all had a great Next so far. Very excited to be here. My name is Frank Weigel. I'm the GM for a small part of Google Cloud, and I've got Philippe and Sam with me. Why don't you two tell us a little bit in your audience about who you are and what your company does. Philippe?
Yeah, so maybe a few words on Veolia. Veolia aims to be the benchmark company for ecological transformation. We're about 20,000 people around the world in more than 55 countries. Our activities are around designing, implementing, and operating practical and useful solutions for water treatment, waste management, energy management. And through these activities, we contribute to ease access to resources, preserve resources, and even replenish resources through circular process. And so I'm Philippe Benoit. I'm working at Group CTO Office. I'm at the head of cyber security and compliance, and I'm also a global digital workplace program director.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming. Looking forward to hear you tell us more. Sam.
Hi everyone, Sam Sibley. So I work at the Project Management Institute, and a lot of you will know us either as PMI or for the PMP qualification. I've kind of fallen into this space. My background is ex-tennis player, fallen into the world of innovation, tech. So I don't know how I fell into it, but so that's me. We're a global organization serving the project management profession, and we have millions in our community that we serve. So technology is a critical component of the project economy, and that's why we're here today to talk about it. Excuse you.
I apologize. Great. Well, we're going to talk a lot about frontline workers today. We'll do a little bit of introduction there. And then the main topic, of course, is how to accelerate innovation for frontline workers. And I think we're going to hear some great examples about how technology can be used to really empower a lot of the frontline workers, a group that historically often has not been very digitally empowered and transformed. Just on the logistics side, we'll leave about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. You'll see there's a microphone, so if you have questions at the end, please come and ask. And I also should point out the session is being recorded, so you can share it with your colleagues afterwards. With that said, let's dive a little bit into frontline workers. I mean, I think everybody knows frontline workers, of course, what they are, but I think it's worth diving a little bit into what actually makes their lives hard and what is the impact on the business. So, oddly enough, frontline workers, or not oddly, but frontline workers are typically the face of a company, right? Whether it's a store employee, whether it's somebody in a garage fixing cars, whether it is an amusement park. It's the frontline workers who typically are the face of a company. And we all know that these days, the experience that your customers have with your company is largely defined by that engagement with frontline workers. And so as crucial as they are, we find that they typically are a group that have very high turnover. We find that they are not always as engaged as we would like. So there's high disengagement. And often the digital transformation really has bypassed them. And so I think these are some of the challenges that probably all of you are seeing in your companies. And in today's session, we really will hear some of the approaches and ways of how we can change that and the impact that that brings. So with that said, why don't we talk a little bit about the specifics in your company, in Veolia, Philippe. Why don't you tell us a bit more about what kind of frontline worker roles do you have?
Yeah, so Veolia is a utility, so it means that most of my colleagues are on the field. More than 3/4 of Veolia employees are field workers. So it means, could you go to the next slide, please?
Of course.
We are all resourcers, as you can see, but there are a diversity of activities because of this all the things that you are doing, it can be operation on a water treatment plant. It can be bio-waste treatment installation operation also. It can be maintenance of water networks. It might be driving trucks for waste collection. And so this and many other activities. And this diversity of activities make countless opportunities to digitally support our workforce in their daily tasks. So our ambition is clearly to provide the right digital toolbox to our employees and to enable for them more efficiency, more productivity, help them to be more cyber resilient. Of course, that's also a big stake for us, and to focus on added value tasks for the business. So we can switch to a quick example. Next slide.
So what are some of the, do you want to talk about the challenges? Are there certain challenges that you face with digital transformation? Or what are the kind of...
Yeah. So to illustrate that, we can speak about Benoit. Benoit is one of our plants. It's a waste management plant in France. And so on this plant, they adopted digital tools. So they ensured the digital transformation of their activities. And so thanks to that, they answer many challenges they faced. And among them, it's a reduction of paper-based processes and also the improvement of the collaboration within the site and also with other sites, so sharing expertise, experience with other sites.
Excellent. Now, Sam, clearly PMI, I think, is less about having frontline workers, but of course you work with a lot of companies that have frontline workers. So tell us a bit more about what do you see kind of more broadly in that bigger picture?
So I'll link it back to the project manager. I think we all see projects are being disrupted everywhere, right? And project managers play a critical role in that. And if you think about technology, technology is the biggest catalyst to change in the way in which we manage and work, right? Everyone knows that. So culturally, it's very, very different. So what we see is that empowering project managers to understand two things. Number one, how do you really understand as a practitioner how to leverage technology to be more efficient in what you do? How do you free up time? How do you drive better outcomes, deliver on time, etc.? But the other thing is, how do you become a strategist? How do you really think about understanding the opportunity more longer term as to how your project or program or portfolio is going to be able to leverage technology? And I think that's something that we're playing, or we believe at PMI, being the standard behind project management, it's something that we feel very passionate about, and we should be at the front of educating the community around that. So the lens is very different. It's not necessarily frontline workforce, but I would say that project managers are at the front of project and organizational change and therefore have a critical role to play in that area.
Okay, great. Now, both of you, as we just heard, are facing complex problems, and the frontline workers do cover a very wide range of responsibility, right? Especially in your case, as you described, 3/4 of the company are frontline workers. It's the core of your business. And you're both trying to solve for technology needs that can serve both the variety of needs in frontline workforce as well as the broader organization, of course, who are not frontline workers. So Sam, on the PMI, you've spent, I think, quite a lot of time studying how organizations can successfully empower their workforce with this concept that we call citizen development, which is being able to build applications even though you're not an app developer. And that's what we often find something very relevant to frontline workers, because a lot of these tasks are maybe not even fully understood in the level of detail by somebody who isn't actually engaged in it. And so having the people who are doing the task, solving the problem, often they're great partners. So can you share a bit about what citizen development is about for you and how you and PMI have seen it create impact?
Sure, yeah. So first of all, I mean, citizen development, or CD, it's been around for a while. Like, it's a movement that's gaining more traction over time, and it's really come about because of the power of no-code and low-code technology. But you mentioned it earlier. It's a movement that empowers non-technical people to be able to build applications, right? Which is great. Now, there's obviously things that have to be considered when you open the treasure chest up to a wide range of people. But really, the reason why this came about was a couple of things. Number one, we all know there's a huge supply and demand issue. And I'm not going to talk about that because every conference you go to, everyone talks about supply and demand and all that kind of stuff. But if you actually think about it logically, the demand for technology and innovation right now has never been higher. There is a significant deficit of traditional development capabilities across an organization. In fact, there's one stat that we did a lot of research around this, and that over 67% of organizations who are trying to find specific IT talent to place into a particular role can't find it. And that's a major problem, right? I mean, we can even just look at it and say whatever, but we've got to act and do something about it. And if you think about it, you know, and Philippe, you mentioned it, but the frontline workers are closer to the problem or the opportunity. So why not empower culturally those people to be able to solve problems and achieve great innovation at the front line, innovation on the edge? It's all about the frontline workforce, right? So I think that's really important. But from a benefits point of view, you really need to think about this as culturally, it opens up a massive opportunity to drive better innovation, more empowerment, right? If you empower your frontline workforce to be able to do more, retention is much better, right? People are more empowered and more motivated and committed to where they work because they can actually do something rather than relying on going to, you know, an external group to ask for some help, right? And the whole speed and agility is key, right?
I think we have a diagram of, you know, especially how do you then take it out in an organization?
Yeah. So before I go into that, right? So, but keep it up there, it's fine. So we worked with a very large organization, and they quoted something and said, just because you get the keys to a car doesn't mean you're going to drive that car safely from A to B without crashing. You think about it for a minute, right? So think about this whole world of citizen development. You get access, you get the keys to the car, but what are the guardrails in place, right? I mean, that really, really needs to be thought through. So what PMI created was this concept of a citizen development canvas, which is all underpinned by a maturity model. And what you can see on there is, at the bottom, the circle illustrates what's really, really easy, right? So this first phase of discovery and experimentation is happening everywhere. I can guarantee every organization in this crowd, in some pockets, are doing some level of innovation when it comes to no-code and low-code technology. The reality is, moving outside of that circle is actually quite complex. And it's complex because it's a change program, accountability, risk, ownership, KPIs, operating model. These are all things that you have to think about, especially in a complex organization. So what we've tried to do at PMI is to really anchor that around some sort of playbook or blueprint, which is what you can see on here as a canvas, that allows organizations to move outside of that circle, which is where most of the world are really kind of operating. And what I would say to folks in the IT space, if there's any IT folks in this audience, which I imagine there are going to be, is that we see this as being all about fusion. You can empower the frontline workforce because you don't want to stifle innovation, but at the same time, you need to put guardrails in place to protect. And it's this fusion dynamic of those two worlds coming together that intersect, which is where we see large organizations finding tremendous value, right? So I think this really underpins a lot of the governance and operating model and risk management around adopting no-code and low-code, and I can give some examples later on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sam. Now, I think for Veolia, you also have a very specific approach. Maybe share some.
Yeah, to answer your question, we have to have in mind that such digital empowerment cannot be achieved without any effort. So it's a long journey. And so for that, I'd like to just talk about Veolia Cloud strategy. So we started in 2013 with, we have entered in a public cloud, a SaaS first strategy. And in 2017, we launched a main foundation project to support our position of digital business partner and digital solution provider. So the first project is a better cloud, which is all about moving our assets to the public cloud, closing our on-premise data center, and supporting the transformation of our application to a cloud-native format. And there is Satawad, which is a visible part of the iceberg for end users, for employees, which is about providing a common, more modern, more collaborative, more secure digital workplace environment to everybody. And so the ambition of SATAWAD is included in the name of the program, because SATAWAD stands for secure at any time, from anywhere and from any device. And so that's exactly what we want for end users, to have the same experience that we all have in our personal life. When you access your bank account, you don't care where you are, which device you use, what time it is. You just want to access securely to your bank account information through an internet connection. And that's the target of SATAWAD. So SATAWAD provide a more secure, more collaborative environment, and it enables also for employees to use the device that best fits their needs, because it provides a device agnostic environment. All is on the web, so the web browser is the access device. So that's the program which allows the user to be more productive. To answer your question about technology, what's important for me is to keep watching new technologies, following new feature on existing platforms, checking the evolution of new platform, new technologies such as low-code, no-code, generative AI. I have to mention this during this Google Next, because that's the main topic. But that's an important thing to go ahead on the digital transformation.
Thank you. Actually, I guess it's a good time to plug AppSheet, which is Google's offering for low-code, no-code. It's part of the Workspace offering. And actually, talking about Gen AI, I hope some of you had a chance to see our session earlier. I think we had in the developer keynote and others, we showed a bunch of how we can use AI to make building apps easier as well. And so it's always fascinating, I find, how the same technology that creates better outcome kind of for the product also becomes part of the tools of how actually this empowerment advances. Because we all know that, funny enough, it's really hard to make things easy. And so making app building easy actually uses more and more of that very advanced, very latest technology that we have.
Can I make one point?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So that's it, just off the cuff a little bit, but the whole convergence of the CD world, no code and low code with AI, I mean, it's all about democratization, making things more accessible. I mean, the narrative's the same. I mean, when no code and low code first came about, and it was about empowering more people to be able to do more, right? Widening the funnel. Gen AI is the same concept, yes. Right? It's just empowering more people to be able to achieve stuff rather than a small selection of people.
It just adds more, far more advanced ways in some ways, right? And now, with AppSheet, you can literally talk about what kind of app you would want, and it will start build that app for you. And it's all just pushing to, and as you say, widening the audience who can create the outcome they want, because often, if we truly have frontline workers or people who run a process, build apps, they know the outcome, they know what they want, but they just traditionally don't have the means of getting there. And that is what always gets me excited about this space. I think technology should be there, right, to serve people, to make life easier, to help, and not be an obstacle that's complex and difficult. Now, we talked a lot about technology, and we talked about some of the problems specifically that you're trying to solve. Let's talk about the solution and some of the frameworks and best practices that are involved there. And so you mentioned SATAWAD earlier. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you implement that and what that means?
Yeah. So SATAWAD is clearly our digital workplace framework. It has, of course, an IT dimension because it relies on three main principles. First one is the adoption of Google Workspace, but there is a transformation of the information system to a web and cloud format. And last but not least, the third principle is the adoption of Chromebooks when it's done, because we consider it's the most efficient, most secure device to access such information system. And so it has an IT dimension because it's about deploying tools, it's about managing obsolescence, it's about increasing the cyber resilience, but it's also an enterprise project because it's about cultural change, new way of working, more transparency, more efficiency, more collaboration. So people are able now to focus on business-centric activities and to develop new way of working all together. So that's for SATAWAD, and one of the challenge we have with SATAWAD is to keep enriching the SATAWAD toolbox, digital toolbox. And so the last components that we enter, and that's here I make the link with what you mentioned about AppSheet. The last tool that we integrated in our SATAWAD toolbox is AppSheet, with two clear ambitions. One, to boost SATAWAD progress, because we still have a remediation to do. Many applications are not yet SATAWAD compliant, so we keep remediating this application. That's the first ambition. But the other ambition is clearly to cover not yet digitized processes and boost digital transformation of the organization and enable our end user to be creative and to automate, optimize their daily processes. So that's our ambitions. Our first challenge has been during the preparation phase to define the right governance for such a platform. It took time, but now we define the right governance.
Well, governance is definitely a key aspect. Sam, same question to you. So, how have you managed to help standardize some of these processes to help roll out the technology?
So, I'd probably summarize it in, there's three assessments. And what I mean by assessment is a process that an organization needs to follow that we're seeing as being critical in this process. One is a suitability assessment. There's so many times that people try to adopt technology and it's the wrong use case. It's just the wrong pathway for them. But something so basic as going through a suitability assessment, just people don't do. They just go straight to jumping into building something, right? And so I think what we're seeing in major organizations is that need for suitability provides that governance and that standard that everyone can follow along a pathway, which is critical. The other one being risk assessments. Right, so, and I talk to a lot of organizations. I can, name one because it's in the public. You look at Shell. So Shell have built their whole citizen development business. And by the way, you're talking about thousands and thousands of citizen developers around the world. They're pretty advanced when it comes back to the canvas that I mentioned. But they've built everything based on a zonal model. And that zonal model basically dictates who in the organization is able to build what based on risk. It's very simple, right? So it's got suitability assessments, it's got risk assessments, it defines the level of complexity, the level of risk for the organization based on data and various other mechanisms, and then it provides a pathway to that individual, right? And it navigates that individual through a path. So that is a really, really important one. But the last one arguably is the most important, and companies like Shell and major organizations around the world are really leveraging, is an environmental check. What exists in your organization today that you can leverage? How many times do we see technology built upon technology and all this legacy platforms that just becomes, you put a plaster, or for folks here, like a Band-Aid on top of a deep wound, right? It doesn't solve the problem. You just, layers of the onion just go up and then you can't unravel it. It's a problem. So understanding your environment and what fits and what doesn't fit and what can you leverage is a really, really critical component. So we're seeing those three assessments, Frank, as being really critical to the governance and the process.
And I assume you talked about the criticality, security, and so on. I assume typically you would have businesses start at, the somewhat maybe less critical parts to kind of start to get their feet wet with this new technology, or do you jump right in and kind of take something that has a really high payoff?
Companies are doing it very differently. What I can say is that large organizations that are really adopting this are trying to solve the most challenging problem they're trying to solve right now is a graduation process that takes a low-risk app that was built by a frontline worker and mobilizing it across the enterprise, so moving it more into their IT infrastructure, right? And that graduation process, because IT sees so much value in what's being created on the front line, how do you then bring that into the overall organizational infrastructure? So that graduation process is hard because there's lots of politics. Culturally, it's really challenging. You've got two groups of folks that don't necessarily work together very much. Who owns what, who's accountable, and who owns the risk? Like that needs to be managed. It's really difficult. So that's going back to the canvas that I mentioned. That's the role that we're trying to play in the market.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, for us building the software, we do definitely see very different approaches, and we see some companies that indeed focus on the democratization and really roll it out extremely broad. And we have one company where it's like call center employees, basically, they get time for workshops and they've came up with solutions. To others where it's maybe more traditional through kind of IT, where you start to develop solutions that then get rolled out more broadly. So definitely a lot of different approaches are possible, and whatever fits for your company, I think is always a weighing of those different factors. Now, why do you think it's important for organizations to have that governance strategy? We just heard some of the aspects of security. Philippe, what do you see at Veolia?
Yeah, so in our case, it was we cannot do a full assessment of everybody and so on. 220,000 people around the world, it would have been a nightmare. So we focused on defining a right governance to avoid past mistakes, and so avoid to recreate shadow IT, and that was one of our main stakes for this governance. So the challenge has been to find the best compromise between digital transformation and creativity versus having the right level of control to avoid this shadow IT. And so today the result is that any employee within Veolia can access the AppSheet platform, but must comply to 2 levels of control. The first level of control is they have to become a citizen developer. What does it mean? It means that they have to follow a training course to have the right skill on the platform, so to know what they are doing. They have to be aware of Veolia low-code application platform golden rules. So that's a set of rules that we have defined for such platform. Once they are citizen developer, they can access the platform and design prototype application. That means that there is a restricted number of users. Today it's about 3 users, so it's really limited. And to go a step further, to extend the number of users, they have to publish the application. And for that, that's a second level of control. There is a checklist. And this checklist have a set of actions that they have to achieve. The main actions are recording the application in a global portfolio, so everybody knows what application have been developed with AppSheet. It means that some citizen developer can inspire from other use cases, have not to reinvent the wheel when it has already been done. A second action is to build a community between the citizen developer and the user of the application to establish a communication channel for improvement, for issue management. So it's a kind of maintenance. That's the way we find to have a maintenance for such application. And another main action is the compliance to what we call Safe Zone Matrix. That's an internal tool that we designed. It's a really simple tool. It's a self-assessment tool based on 10 questions, a mix of functional and technical questions. If every answer are in the green zone, they can use a low-code application platform. If it's orange, maybe ask your IT teams. And if it's red, pass your way and go to more traditional development because your use case is too complex. So that's the 2 levels of controls that we defined.
Great. I love it. That's a very sophisticated model and still very broad. I'm really impressed. And
our objective is to leave our user express their creativity. So if they are motivated to use the platform, they can use it. They just have to comply to the rules. Yeah, excellent. I think it's a great model you have. How do you think about assessing the success of initiatives, right? We just talked a little bit about different things, and how do you decide whether something has been successful? Sam, why don't we start with yours?
Yeah, and I guess it's a difficult question to answer because companies are at various different stages of maturity, and therefore how you measure success and the types of qualification criteria or success criteria may be quite different, but essentially, there are organizations, not that I'm going to name right now, that are delivering in excess of $100 million of an economic value into their business per year, leveraging no-code technology. I mean, this is happening. This isn't just something that 4 or 5 years ago we were talking about this as a hype. This is real now. Like, it's actually reality. So I think it's just understanding, like, for people that are quite mature in their organizations and what they're trying to do, then there's going to be mechanisms in place to be able to track that value, KPIs and dashboards and all that kind of good stuff. But for a lot of you, there isn't going to be that. So it's about, where do you start? Like, you've got to start somewhere. You've got to be able to measure value in short little, incremental steps to be able to then deliver that bigger opportunity and take that upwards, in the chain of command in your organization. So there's different ways. I'm conscious of time, but so I want Philippe to be able to have the time to mention something as well.
I think, Philippe, you brought us actually a few examples of what some of these apps that come out of the process.
Yeah, just to answer your question, in our case, the success could be measured based on the number of citizen developers, for instance, that should grow in the time, or the ratio of published apps compared to prototypes and so on. But the best answer to speak about successes within Veolia is to go to concrete examples. Here you have two concrete examples that have been designed during last AppSheet hackathon that we did recently within Veolia. The first one is about inventory of safety equipment. So we have many plants within the organization. That's on industrial sites. We have safety equipment on them. Before the front like workers have to go on each safety equipment, take a paper, fill the model, the status, the location, and so on. Now they just take their smartphone, scan a QR code, have automatically all the information, just provide the status by checking boxes, and it's automatically injected in live in the database and goes on the dashboard. So at any time we can live see the status of the inventory. The other example that we have on AppSheet is about vehicle fleet inspection. We have many vehicles due to our activity. It can be trucks for waste collection, for example. And so before, the driver has to fill a form on a paper. With the time, he come back to the site. If he had issues, crashes, and so on. Now, he just take a smartphone. It's automatically timestamps. If there is an issue, he take a picture of what happened. And the maintenance team is directly notified when it submits a form, and they can take the decision if maintenance is urgent maintenance is necessary or not. So that's two recent examples, but from the early day of SATAWAD, so since 2017, our field workers identified quick wins based on just collaborative tools, really simple use cases. For instance, on one side, they used a Google form to collect matters. It's automatically injected in a spreadsheet, and you have a Looker Studio that provides a dashboard of the status. Another example is for multidisciplinary teams sites. The manager has to create a report for each team after each daily briefing session. Now you just use a common spreadsheet, vertical screen in the meeting room, and they go through the tasks, and automatically everybody has the right level of information, and even you can share it to the customer. And the feedback is that he saved about 1 hour and a half per day, so it's not it's considerable. And the last but not least, it's simply Google Meet to avoid a manager which has multi-site to manage to be constantly on the road. So the master words here are release time for what matter, be more business-centric, more efficient in your daily activities.
Yeah. And a great reminder that digital transformation sometimes isn't very complex from the technology, but it can still have a huge impact. Now, we are, before we come to questions, kind of to wrap this up, would love to hear kind of your thoughts, your advice to the audience that you've taken away from what you've learned that you wish you would have known when you started. So maybe Sam?
Yeah, so mine's really simple. I would say you've got to think big enough and strategic enough in terms of what's the vision, where you're trying to get to. And this links back to my assessment concept that I spoke about. Cliche of, but you've got to start small because you've got to do something now, right? You can't think too far ahead. You've got to do something now. Everything that you do has to be measurable. I mean, this is just like a basic business case. It's got to be measurable. You've got to be able to track something. It's got to be quantifiable. I see so many organizations and people measure, and it's so soft. And they go up to the CIO, and suddenly it's like, well, why doesn't it come off the ground? It's because you haven't got anything there, right? There's no clear numbers and a clear case. But also, I would say, think about the fusion dynamic. This is not about the business and frontline workforce working in isolation to IT. Companies that have got that figured out, that kind of harmony, that intersect, are really doing some interesting things, right? And I'm more than happy to speak to folks after about some of those examples.
Okay. Thank you, Sam. Philippe?
Yeah, so first, as I already mentioned, keep watching technology evolution to always feed your digital toolbox and make your users best equipped users. And the second is clearly onboard your user in the digital journey, make them responsible, provide them the right tools, digital tools to improve their daily activities. They have plenty of ideas, and they are the best place to know what has to be done to improve their daily activities, but always with keeping control on what is done to avoid shadow IT.
Excellent. Before we close, there are a bunch of sessions around Workspace and AppSheet. I think we have some on there and the QR code. So please, if you want to check out more about just how easy it is, I know we are in the Workspace showcase as well. You can see apps being built live there. And then lastly, of course, we always would love your feedback on what was good in this session, what really resonated with you, so we can keep offering great sessions. Thank you very much for attending, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.